The gas station cashier blinked, confused. As a teen in mismatched socks, a hoodie 3 sizes too big, and a look of total disbelief slapped a crumpled $5 bill onto the counter. "Hi. I was kidnapped by my neighborhood HOA and dropped off 3 states away. Can I use your phone? That's how I found out my son was alive." After 8 hours of panic, police alerts, and searching every corner of our town, I learned my son, Jake, had been abducted by a group of suburban lunatics who thought enforcing HOA bylaws gave them the right to commit actual felonies. Unfortunately for them, I'm the district attorney, and they just declared war on the wrong family. Just 2 weeks ago, we had moved into Maple Glen, a picture-perfect neighborhood with trimmed hedges, matching mailboxes, and that eerie Stepford wife energy where everyone waves a little too hard and smiles a little too wide. I had accepted a transfer to the city's central office, closer to the state border, hoping for a quieter life for Jake after a rough year. Jake wasn't a bad kid, just a sarcastic 16-year-old with a deep love for skateboards, obscure playlists, and challenging authority figures. Everything this HOA hated. The first warning came exactly 3 hours after the moving truck left. Jake did a quick lap around the cul-de-sac on his board. Hoodie up, earbuds in, oblivious to the fact that he had just committed neighborhood sacrilege. Minutes later, a woman in a pastel pink tracksuit with a clipboard materialized in our driveway like she'd teleported. Her name was Brenda. Of course it was. She introduced herself as the president of the Maple Glen Homeowners Association and Community Standards Officer, as if that granted her actual law enforcement powers. She cited Jake for reckless sidewalk activity, disturbing the peace with bass-heavy music, and, no joke, unauthorized wheel-based recreation. She even mentioned something about neighborhood harmony quotas. I brushed it off. Brenda seemed annoying, maybe a little power-trippy, but nothing more. I told her politely that my son wasn't disturbing anything and that any official complaints could be sent to meth property owner. She looked mildly offended, scribbled something on her clipboard, and marched off. Jake laughed. "This place is like a cult with yard flamingos." I should have listened more closely to that joke. Over the next week, Brenda and her compliance team, a ragtag bunch of overzealous retirees with walkie-talkies, ramped things up. Jake got warnings for leaving his hoodie on a porch chair, parking his bike too close to the hedges, and not waving at a neighbor within the required 3-second grace window. We got handwritten notes, emails, and even a formal letter accusing Jake of intentional disruption of visual uniformity. One neighbor took a photo of Jake's backpack on the lawn and posted it in the neighborhood app with the caption, "Littering now." Jake, being Jake, pushed back. He skated with a cape made from an old HOA newsletter, mowed the lawn in zigzags, put googly eyes on our security cameras. I warned him not to poke the bear, but he was 16 and invincible. Besides, who expects a suburban HOA to retaliate like a cartel? Then came the day he disappeared. It was a Wednesday. I got home early and noticed the house was empty. No Jake. His phone was off, which was unusual. I figured he was at the skate park. When he didn't come home by dinner, I called around. Nothing. By 8 p.m., I filed a missing persons report. By midnight, I was panicking. At 3:12 a.m., my landline rang. One of those calls that jolts you out of sleep in full dread. On the other end was a gruff voice with a southern drawl. "Sir, I got a boy here saying he was dumped at the side of our station by some people in a white van with HOA logos. Says you're his dad. You Mason Grant?" I was already grabbing my coat. My son had been kidnapped by the HOA. They'd actually loaded him into a van, crossed state lines, and left him at a gas station like an Amazon return. When I got there, he was sitting on a curb eating beef jerky and drinking root beer. His hoodie was torn, his hair a mess. But he grinned when he saw me. "Hey Dad, you're gonna love this story." My relief was so overwhelming I nearly collapsed. But then the DA in me kicked in. Every ounce of fear, anger, and fury crystallized into a plan. These people thought they were above the law. They thought community rules let them override federal law. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Back home, I pieced together everything Jake remembered. 3 HOA members, Brenda, a guy named Carl, and someone Jake dubbed Clipboard Chuck, had approached him mid-afternoon. Said he was being relocated for violating civic peace standards. Jake thought it was a prank until they literally waved a chloroform rag around, not to use it, just for theatrical effect, then loaded him into a van wrapped in vinyl decals that read Maple Glen Youth Outreach Initiative. They drove for hours, rambling about resetting behavior and reclaiming suburban identity. Jake played along, asked for mood music, and pretended to be a runaway child prodigy from MIT. They finally dumped him at a gas station with $20 and a bottle of hand sanitizer. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to prosecute them. I was going to dismantle them. Kidnapping, unlawful restraint, endangerment of a minor, interstate abduction. I had the tools, the connections, and now the motive. I called Detective Simmons, an old friend from the state police. When I told him the bullet points, there was a long pause. You're telling me a neighborhood association kidnapped your kid like it's a boot camp for bad behavior? Yes. Okay. I'll get the task force ready. That night, I built a timeline using our doorbell cam. At 1:37 p.m., a white van with the HOA logo pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Brenda, clipboard Chuck, and Carl. Matching polos. Clipboards. Ridiculous ceremony. They didn't force Jake exactly, but they manipulated the situation. He looked confused, then shrugged like he was humoring them. That shrug haunted me for days. Later, Jake told me more. Brenda had rambled about suburban decency initiatives and corrective excursions. They claimed to have a character reset program for teens displaying non-compliant behaviors, which included skateboarding, hoodies, and skipping the community pancake breakfast. Jake, unfazed, told them he had selective authority blindness and asked if they had clearance from the Department of Juvenile Affairs. Carl panicked. Brenda doubled down. They called the gas station a recalibration station. It had 2 benches, a vending machine, and a bathroom that hadn't been cleaned since the Clinton administration. Jake wandered into the station and convinced the attendant to let him use the phone. The calmness Jake showed made me proud, but also terrified. These people thought they were administering justice. I reached out to Rita Thompson, a former Marine turned neighborhood dog trainer with a long-standing grudge against the HOA. Once fined $300 for improper grass blade orientation, she took it personally. She invited me over and showed me her collection of HOA intel. Meeting notes, emails, even a flash drive of recordings. In one, Brenda proposed a behavioral adjustment trial for Jake. Chuck called him a young anarchist. Carl said they should ask the city first. Brenda snapped, Mason Grant is the city. We must act decisively. That was enough. I sent everything to Simmons. The FBI was looped in. The HOA had no idea they'd crossed a state line with the son of a district attorney. We drafted search warrants. Meanwhile, Brenda sent out a community email titled A Win for Order. I forwarded it to every media outlet I could. That night, Jake and I ate takeout in the backyard. So what happens now? He asked. Yeah? Now we press charges. Now they get a taste of real authority. Jake raised his root beer. To Brenda, may her spreadsheets rot. He had no idea how right he was. By morning, law enforcement was moving. One HOA board member, Doris, had turned informant. She wore a wire into an emergency meeting. Brenda, we returned him safely. We provided structure. Carl, structure with snacks. Chuck, we can't call it a field trip. We crossed a state line. That was it. Verbal confirmation. We had them. Jake's TikTok went viral. Kidnapped by HOA, my horror story. The follow-up? Escape from HOA Island. The HOA released a video. Brenda, flanked by Carl and Chuck, declared sometimes standards require difficult actions. They were mocked mercilessly. Memes exploded. Late-night hosts roasted them. Then came the trial. The courtroom was packed. Karen entered flanked by defense attorneys. Jack sat next to me, a plain suit and sneakers. The prosecution laid out the charges. The jury didn't buy Brenda's excuses, especially after Jake played a recording from inside the van. Brenda's voice, this is a service to the neighborhood. When he comes back, maybe he'll be grateful. The silence that followed crushed the room. Brenda cracked under cross-examination. This would have worked if he wasn't your son. The jury took less than 2 hours. Guilty. Later, a DOJ agent handed me a folder. This wasn't isolated. We needed a public case. Your son gave us that. HOAs across the country were audited. Some disbanded. A bill was introduced to limit HOA power. 3 weeks after the verdict, Maple Glen was a different place. No banners. No clipboards. People smiled again. Brenda got 11 years. Carl and Chuck took plea deals. Jake became a podcast star. His stories resonated. His voice mattered. And one ordinary kid in a hoodie reminded us all that real power comes not from clipboards, but from truth. And just enough chaos to set a neighborhood free.